Hello, my lovelies. We're back. As promised. This just keeps sliding. Okay. Well, this is the angle you're getting. I hate... Maybe... Nope. Probably thinking, Sam, why don't you do this before you start? Mind your business. There we go. We're back finally, as promised. I'm gonna try to at least get through 2 more chapters. I'm gonna be honest. I also have no idea what the hell's going on. I remember the characters though, Hallie and Julian. Let's see. So we're starting at chapter 13, but I'll read you the last sentence from the last chapter where we left off. Forget about him and fix your mess. Well, that about sums this up. Owen has to go. There was already a crowd assembled, wanting to be entertained for the night. Why not make it a murder mystery? Everyone would take turns guessing who killed the redhead for continuously putting his hands on Hallie's arm. Oh, wait, let's restart this. Oh, feisty. Owen has to go. There was already a crowd assembled wanting to be entertained for the night. Why not make it a murder mystery? Everyone could take turns guessing who killed the redhead for continuously putting his hands on Hallie's arm. They'd eventually figure out it was Julian, or would perhaps take one look at his face and know straight off the bat. God, he did not like the way they were laughing together, the way they sort of matched each other step for step, 2 very alike people on the same mission. Tame the maniacs who were currently blowing like miniature cyclones through the event, chocolate and sprinkles smeared across their chins and cheeks. The people sipping wine in front of the vase table were complaining about the shoddy childcare, and he liked that criticism of Hallie even less than the sight of Owen staring at her curls as if eternally fascinated by their shape. Actually, scratch that. He didn't like it less. He simply liked none of this, whatsoever. Having her so close, looking so fucking beautiful, and feeling as if he wasn't allowed to speak with her. Had their last encounter been so bad that they weren't even on speaking terms anymore? Her halting laugh reached Julian, and a tug started behind his collar. He'd missed that laugh. Had it really been only 2 days? Was he just supposed to never hear it again, even if embarking on any sort of relationship together would end in disaster? No, that didn't work for him. Julian didn't realize he was walking towards the MC booth in the corner of the tent until he arrived there and held out his hand. May I borrow the microphone for a moment? Oh, Julian. The MC juggled the mic, clearly caught off guard by Julian's abrupt approach. He was thrown off as well. What the hell was he doing? That's what we all want to know, Julian. Joining the fray just because she's there. What?
I was gonna say, I didn't know you were fine. I was gonna say, I think I gave an old person that takes one of my classes a heart attack today because they're 35 and they were talking about Twilight.
First of all, get out.
Can I finish the story?
Calling a person in your class an old person at 35 is criminal, and you're in jail. Go to jail.
And then they were talking about Twilight, and I go, oh, I love Twilight, and they go, oh, did you see in theaters when it came out? And I go, no, I was 2.
Close the door and get out. They were immaculate cinematic masterpieces
I know,
in
I
theaters.
love them.
I saw a midnight release of New Moon. I am the coolest person alive. I saw New Moon midnight release. Remember, Mom?
No, I was talking.
You got me the special cup.
I was talking about how in class there's this old person who was talking about Twilight.
Close the door. I'm in the middle of something.
And
Sorry, viewers. Where were we? Yes, Julian making dumb decisions as per usual. Refusing to question that disconcerting certainty, Julian raised the microphone to his mouth. If I might have your attention, please. He couldn't see anything but Hallie's blonde head popping up from the floor, where she'd been trying to coax a crying child out from under a table. With more sugar, for the love of God. I'm beginning children's story time now, out on the lawn. He checked his watch automatically to register the time. Please send them outside now. Pick them up at 8:05. Thank you. Are we sure CBD doesn't get people at least buzzed? Natalie asked as he passed. I could have sworn you just said you were conducting a children's story time. A bead of sweat trickled down his spine. I did say that. Why? She said, visibly astonished. Julian started to brush off the question or give an unsatisfactory answer, such as, I don't know, but he didn't want to take a step backward with Natalie. They formed a tenuous bond tonight. If we learned anything in that brief window of time, it was that having a relationship with a sister meant sharing potentially embarrassing things with her. It's because of a woman. Natalie's mouth dropped open. Another woman? Jesus, when she said it like that, it sounded awful. Well, yes, but There was simply no way to explain that he'd cast the net of his interest in Hallie so far and wide that it had swallowed up his secret admirer. Yes, I forgot. He'd wish them to be one and the same. They are, so. Good for you. Good for you, King. I just don't understand how he doesn't put two and two together. Like, it's not that big a plot twist. Now, they were inseparable entities. I don't get it. His sister sounded almost dazed. You barely leave the house and there are two women on deck? Every person's a dream. Don't have to leave the house and you still got options. Julian scoffed. That is hardly the case. She waited, saying nothing. More sweat slid down his spine. It's complicated with Hallie. We aren't seeing each other. Nothing can come of it, and we agreed on that matter. Damn. Saying that out loud felt far worse than his sister's claim about him juggling two women. It's just that when she's in trouble or experiencing any kind of distress, I feel somewhat upset about it? Natalie stared. That is to say, I feel as if I'm going to explode if the situation isn't fixed for her. When she isn't smiling, the world becomes a terrible place. Several seconds pass. Do you think what you're saying is normal? Forget it, Julian growled. Please continue to pass out the damn business cards for Corked. I'll be back in a while. He strode out of the tent while unfastening his cufflinks and tucking them into his pants pockets in order to roll up his sleeves. It seems like a best practice when dealing with kids. Wouldn't want to appear intimidating. Brisk mountain air dried the layer of perspiration on Julian's forehead as he walked out of the tent. He stopped short when he found Hallie hustling a dozen youngsters into a half circle on the lawn, while Owen watched. His devotion to her clearer than a freshly washed window pane. Okay. I don't know. I don't want to be described that way as someone's devotions toward me. The other man turned at his approach, cautiously sizing him up. Julian's sleeve-rolling movements became increasingly hasty. Hello? Hi, Owen said back, taking a sip from his wineglass. I'm Owen Stark. Julian held out his hand. They shook, quite firmly. He never really considered his height an advantage until the other man had to crane his neck slightly. Julian Voss. Yes, I know. The redhead smile didn't reach his eyes. It's nice to meet you. Likewise. State your intentions towards her, motherfucker. How do you know Hallie? Was it his imagination, or did the bastard look a little smug? Yes, he was definitely the kind of man who would make a perfect guest of honor in a murder mystery. We own competing gardening businesses in St. Helena. Of course, Julian had already known that answer to that. Apparently, he just wanted to torture himself by hearing this man speak with familiarity about the woman who occupied his every thought these days. Someday I'm hoping to convince her to join forces. Now that was news. Or was it? Owen's emphasis on join forces made it sound as if he meant something else, not business-related. As in, a personal relationship with Hallie. Marriage, even. How close were they, exactly? And truly, what business was it of Julian's when she appeared to want nothing to do with him anymore? He didn't know. But the gravelly grind in his chest was so unpleasant it took him a moment to speak. Maybe she doesn't want to be convinced, or it would have happened by now. Damn, Julian came to play today all of a sudden. Like, okay, where did all this courageousness and boldness come from? Maybe she needs to know a man is willing to play the long game. How long is too long, Owen? I guess I'm going to kill him. Julian stepped closer. Oh, is it a game to you? Okay, Julian came to play today. I don't know what he ate, but damn. Hallie slid in between Julian and Owen. Sorry. Hallie slid in between Julian and Owen, splitting a startled glance between them that quickly turned unpulsed. Oh dear. Her hip brushed Julian's groin, and he had the most pressing urge to drag her up against him like a fucking caveman. Maybe we can continue this later, when we aren't under threat of mutiny. That works for me, Owen said with a big dumb smile, saluting with his wine. Absolutely, Julian agreed, keeping his eye on the other man as he went to the front of the semicircle, and then all he could do was stand there and absorb the absolute disarray that lay at his feet. Several children were sprawled out on the grass, coming down from their sugar highs with glazed eyes and twitching limbs. Sprinkles were trapped beneath fingernails and plastered to the corners of mouths. One of them was actually licking the grass, another trying to balance a small Nike sneaker on his head. Two girls fought over an iPad with twin expressions of violence. Well, aren't you all just a mess? Your parents will have to hose you down before putting you in the car tonight. A dozen pair of eyes snapped in his direction, some of them startled, including Hallie's. Maybe his greeting had been a little harsh. One of the children, a girl, giggled, and then they all started to giggle. Our moms aren't going to spray us with a hose, she shouted unnecessarily. Why not? You're all disgusting. Oh, he's great with kids. More laughing. One of them even pitched sideways onto the lawn. Was he doing all right at this? He'd spent exactly 0 time around kids this young, yeah, we could tell. But his college students definitely never laughed at him. They could barely be bothered to crack a smile. Not that he ever joked during a lecture. Time was a serious matter. Somehow he didn't think these kids would appreciate a talk on the impact of capitalism on the value of time. I would like to see him try. Why don't we talk about time travel? Okay, Julian. I thought you were going to read us a story. Julian pointed a finger at the interjector. Disgusting and impatient. I'm getting to the story. But first I want to hear where you would go on a time-traveling mission. Japan! He nodded. Japan? Now? Or 100 years ago? If you hopped in your time-traveling machine and arrived in Japan in the year 1923, you might land in the middle of the Great Earthquake. They blinked up at him. You see, all the events of the past are still active. They remain in order of occurrence, existing in a linear path, beginning at a starting point and reaching all the way to this moment. Everything you're doing in this moment is being recorded by time, whether you realize it or not. Even this? A boy in a San Diego Zoo shirt attempted a handstand, landing at an awkward angle in the grass. Yes, even that. Would anyone else like to tell us where they would go if they time traveled? Several hands went up. As Julian got ready to call on someone, he happened to look up and catch the most fleeting expression on Hallie's face. One he wasn't sure he'd seen before and couldn't really describe. What was it? Certainly not adoration. He wasn't doing that well up here. Still, it was hard to put any other description to her soft, dreamlike expression. The way she looked as if she were being held up only by a string. He had to be misinterpreting the whole thing. Or worse, what if that adoration was for Owen, not him? When Julian cleared his throat, it sounded like he just guzzled a handful of broken walnut shells. All right, in keeping with the time travel theme, on to the story. He clasped his hands behind his back. There once was a man named Doc Brown who built a time-traveling machine out of a DeLorean. Does anyone know what a DeLorean is? Silence. Thankfully, the quiet carried over into the story, and the children remained seated on the grass, listening with only the occasional outbursts of giggles or interruptions, until Julian finished. When he finally glanced up from his rapt audience, their parents were standing behind them holding little coats, and he was pleased to see that many of them were carrying the discount cards for Corked. Natalie must have worked overtime to put them in everyone's hands. He watched Hallie slowly notice them, too, her gaze bouncing around to all the green and white cards, then over at him. That's right, sweetheart. I deliver for you. I can't help it. Okay, then. Story time has ended, he shooed the children away. Go get hosed off. They climbed to their feet in a way that reminded him of newborn giraffes. Most of them went straight to their parents. Julian was startled, however, when a pair of twins ran full speed in his direction and wrapped their skinny arms around his thighs, hugging him. You're getting me dirty, he pointed out, surprised when his throat tugged. Fine, he patted their backs. Very good, thank you. Isn't that the guy from the Alien documentary? One of the parents mused out loud. Julian sighed. Finally, it was over. Thank God. When the kids left, he didn't miss them at all, right? Slowly, Hallie approached him, the beginnings of sunset creating a halo on top of her blonde head. Over the course of his story time, she'd taken off her shoes and her toes sunk into the grass now, tipped in all different colors. Red, green, pink. He could envision her sitting on the floor of a living room trying to choose a shade, giving up and deciding rainbow would give her the best of all the worlds. When had that kind of indecisiveness started to come across as tremendously charming to him? That mysterious look from earlier was no longer in her eye, and he wanted it back. Wanted her to adore him again. How could he crave something that he'd obviously imagined? Thank you for doing that, she said to him, her soft voice mingling with the crickets, the music still coming from the wine tent. You were great. I guess I shouldn't be surprised. They say kids are drawn to authenticity. You really nailed the genuine vibe, calling them disgusting and all. Yes. In the distance he heard the grass licker relating back to the future to his parents, and a weird clunk happened in his chest. People say this all the time, and I never believe them, but did you notice the children were also kind of cute? She pressed her lips together, clearly suppressing a laugh. Yes, I noticed. Why do you think I was compelled to ply them with chocolate? I needed them to like me. I understand now, he admitted. Hallie spent the next few moments staring down at her feet. Why? He had to stuff both hands in his pocket to keep from lifting her chin. Owen was watching them from the shadow of the tent, too, and Christ, was Julian so selfish that he would sabotage her potential relationship with the gardener when he wasn't in a position to offer her one himself? No. Yes, he countered himself out loud. Hallie's head came up, and there were her beautiful eyes. Yes, what? Pulse firing, he shook his head. Nothing. She hummed, narrowing her gaze. Do you happen to know anything about those promotional cards for cork that everyone was holding? He kept his expression neutral. If he informed her of their origin, he'd probably have to tell her about the new awning he ordered for Cork too. And it didn't need to be told he'd gone overboard. He was well aware. And while a relationship with Lorna could help the vineyard, the true reason he'd intervened was standing right in front of him. That perfect little crease that ran down the center of her bottom lip. That dimple in her cheek. Promotional cards for Cork? I didn't notice. Really? She folded her arms across her tits, drawing his attention downward, and God almighty, the way the material of her shirt stretched over those generous mounds would keep him awake tonight. Already he was mentally uncapping his bottle of lube, pressing his open mouth to the center of the pillow, and imagining her beneath him, naked, legs thrown over his shoulders. How odd. I wonder where they came from. If Julian had told her, maybe she would kiss him, or even come home with him. And fuck, that was tempting. But would he be leading her on? Yes, he wanted to make her happy. Yes, he wanted to eviscerate everything that's caused her to worry and put an eternal Hallie smile on her face. Every time he let himself indulge in Hallie, though, that out-of-control feeling threatened to topple him. He didn't know how to allow himself to let go like that. It unnerved him, and he ultimately hurt her feelings, which was the exact opposite of what he wanted. They were cut from different cloth. He craved order, and she was human pandemonium. Yet why was he beginning to have such a hard time remembering that? Maybe because those gray eyes were on him. Her soft, round face brushed in sunset, her mouth so goddamn close he could taste it. I thought of you earlier tonight, he said, without thinking, distracted by the dip of her dimple. You were right about what to say to Natalie. Was I? She searched his eyes. You two had a heart-to-heart? Of sorts, I suppose. The Voss version. There was no denying how good it felt to speak to Hallie like this, just the two of them. He'd met women throughout his life who were logical and concise and regimented, like him. Shouldn't it have been easier to open up to someone who operated the same way? I guess you could say we bonded. That's amazing, Julian, she whispered. For what? Hallie wanted to be kissed. She was standing too close for him to draw any other conclusion, and when she snagged that full, creased bottom lip between her teeth and dropped her gaze to his mouth, he had to suppress a groan. Fuck it! There was no stopping himself. 2 days without her taste, and it was like being starved to death. She helped me with the letter I've been meaning to write, he muttered, dipping his head. Hallie straightened. Oh? She blinked down at her hands. Natalie helped you write a letter? Julian replayed his thoughtless words. What in the hell had he been thinking bringing up the secret Meyer letter? He wasn't thinking. He couldn't keep his hands on straight. No, he couldn't keep his head on straight around Hallie. That was the problem. Why wasn't he suddenly more desperate than before to go retrieve the letter from the stump before anyone could accidentally find it, especially his admirer? Jesus, as he stood there looking down into Hallie's face, the fact that he'd even temporarily left correspondence for someone else made him ill. But Hallie was waiting for an explanation, and he couldn't bring himself to lie. Not to her. Yes, he said, praying the matter would be dropped immediately. A secret admirer, if you can believe it. Writing back seemed like the polite thing to do, although it was more a way for me and Natalie to... That's wonderful, Julian. She blurted. Wow, a secret admirer, that's so old school. Wait, she wasn't letting him finish. He wasn't going to let the letter be found. It was important she understood that. I'm glad things turned a corner with your sister. I'm sure that fact that you're making an effort means the most of all. Not what I suggested you do. She took a step backward away from him. I better get inside to see if Lavinia needs me. Yes, he clipped out, already missing her again. But Hallie, good night. Why did he have a mounting sense of guilt over writing that letter? He and Hallie weren't dating. In fact, they'd specifically agreed not to form any kind of personal relationship. So why did he feel like he'd fucking betrayed her? No matter that he pictured Hallie's face while writing back to the secret admirer, the guilt remained. Hallie, he called to her again, no clue what to follow up with. Jesus Christ, he was nauseous. I'll be over sometime tomorrow to plant some Dusty Miller to really accentuate the lavender, she sang on her way back into the tent, thanking Owen for holding the flap open for her. Thanks again for leading story time. With a smirk for Julian, Owen followed in Hallie's wake. Julian stared after the swinging canvas and winded. What the hell just happened? And would anyone actually miss Owen if he disappeared? When Julian re-entered the tent, it took every ounce of his self-control not to pluck Hallie out from behind the donut booth and carry her back outside, to finish their discussion in a way that would end in her smiling. Why? It would only confuse this thing between them more, but it was a hell of a lot more preferable than leaving their thing unsettled. This mental bedlam came part and parcel with Hallie, and yet he couldn't stop going back for another helping. Julian was about to approach the donut booth when he spotted Natalie across the room. Since he'd gone outside for story time an hour earlier, his sister had clearly put the pedal to the metal on wine consumption and was now flirting with one of the wine vendors, a giant linebacker of a man in the Kiss the Winter apron. As Julian watched, she made an attempt to boost herself onto the man's table in what she had no doubt believed to be the ultimate seductive move, until she slipped off and would have landed on her ass if the linebacker's arm didn't shoot out from behind the table to steady her. In Julian's periphery, he watched a photographer weave her way through the thinning crowd, her expression one of single-minded focus. The last thing the winery needed was a picture of drunk Natalie ending up in the gossip section of some wine blog. With a final frustrated glance towards Hallie, he hastened his way across the room, hoping to intercept his sister before she became internet fodder. But apparently his worry was all for nothing. The Vinter noticed the photographer too. At the last second, he maneuvered Natalie so his gigantic self was blocking the journalist from getting a decent shot. "I'm telling you, August, it's impossible to hum while you hold your nose," Natalie was slurring when Julian reached them. "Try it." Julian assumed this man would say something to humor or distract her, so he was surprised when the man actually pinched his nose and attempted the feat, flashing a Navy tattoo in the process. "Son of a bitch," he mumbled. "Can't hum a note." Natalie laughed long and loud. "You will remember this moment the rest of your life, August Cates." "Yeah," lopsided smile from the Navy man. "Pretty sure I will." His sister stared up at the man for an awkward length of time. "Are we gonna make out?" Okay, well, if it works, it works, I guess. A flash of white teeth. "Cancel all my calls," he shouted over his shoulder to an imaginary secretary. When Natalie took a step in the Vinter's direction and the photographer finally found a better vantage point, that was Julian's cue. "Time to go, Natalie." "Yep," she agreed without missing a beat, allowing herself to be dragged away by her brother. Although Julian lost count of the number of times she looked back over her shoulder at her would-be make-out partner. Forget gas station guy. That guy is the perfect rebound. Make that decision when you're clear-headed. I don't make good decisions when I'm clear-headed. That's why I'm in Napa, remember? She pulled him to a stop while they were still out of Corinne's earshot. "How did things go with Hallie, for whom you would sacrifice your life but will not date?" "Not well, if you must know." She mimicked him, employing a British accent while doing it. Then she kind of deflated all at once. "God, we are dysfunctional people, aren't we? Who unleashed us on the world?" With perfect timing, their mother's most diplomatic laugh rang out while she raised a wineglass to the couple standing at the boss booth. As soon as they departed, her smile dropped like an anvil from a 10-story building. Natalie snorted. "I guess we have our answer." Julian watched his sister rejoin Corinne behind the table, his attention strained back to the other side of the tent before he could stop it. "We are dysfunctional people, aren't we?" Perhaps Hallie was a wretch in the engine of his mental well-being, but was Julian the same to her, or worse? He thought of the first afternoon they met, when he criticized her placement of the flowers and she lost some of her glow. Just minutes ago she'd been soft and flirtatious and he somehow ruined it. Again. Maybe he should be staying away from her because of the damage he could inflict. Because as much as she drove him crazy with her lack of plans and organization, he liked her. A lot. Definitely too much to be leaving letters for someone else. With a spike in his throat, Julian rejoined his family behind the table, where they were preparing to leave. Logical or not, he needs to get that letter and destroy it. Tonight. Okay. I want to say Julian's making moves, but he's not. He's like, like, pick a lane, brother. Pick a lane. Alright, that was chapter 13. Now we're moving on to chapter 14. Let's see. As always, let's see how long it is. Not too bad. Not too bad, I should say. Okay. You guys still with me? It was well after midnight when Hallie, Lavinia, and Jerome... Is Jerome Lavina's husband? I'm assuming Jerome is Lavina's husband. It was well after midnight when Hallie, Lavinia, and Jerome drove down Grapevine Way, having packed up their wine-down display and carpooled back to town. Shops were shuttered, though a few wine bars remained open, probably nearing last call. Along the road, ornate rooftop cornices, were silhouetted by silver moonlit sky. Though the open back seat window of Jerome and Lavinia's catering van, she could hear the chirp of crickets carrying down the mountain and from nearby valleys and vineyards. Jerome and Lavinia dropped Hallie off at her parked truck with an exchange of exhausted waves. They continued down the block to where they would unpack the catering equipment at Fudge Duty before heading home. Hallie got into her truck and let her head loll back against the headrest. She could go home and climb into bed right now, surrounded by snoring dogs, but she made no move to start the engine. Julian had written back to his admirer, and try as she might, she couldn't seem to let it go. There was no way around it. She had to collect that letter. Now, tonight, under the cover of darkness, like a certified weirdo. Teeth gritted, she pushed open the driver's side door and hopped out, pulling her jacket tighter to her body to ward off the cool, misty air. She stole across the silent road, intending to cut through Fudge Judy's to their back alley, then down the road to Julian's jogging path. Having helped Lavinia and Jerome with catering events in the past, she knew they would be busy shelving items in the giant walk-in storage closet, and would be none the wiser that she used the shortcut. Furthermore, any potential witnesses would assume she'd remained in the donut shop the whole time. Any witnesses? Listen to yourself. This whole activity was pointless. Hallie stopped short in front of Court. Was that a new awning? Gone was the old, faded red and white striped one, and had been replaced by a bold green one with the scripted lettering Corked Wine Store, a St. Helena institution since 1957. Where did it come from? Between the rainstorm yesterday and preparing for wind down today, 2 afternoons had passed since the last time she stopped into Court to visit Lorna. Apparently she missed the store getting a facelift? Who was responsible for this? Intuition poked and prodded at Hallie, but she didn't want to acknowledge it. Earlier, as wound down, she'd gone on a mission to find the origin of the business cards, and lo and behold, everyone she spoke to claimed they had been given out at the Voss Vineyard table. She already caught Julian buying pity cases of wine from Lorna. Then came the cards, and now this, a beautiful crisp green awning that updated the struggling shop by several decades. He'd done this, hadn't he? Bought Lorna an awning, driven business her way, put money in the register. What did all of it mean? And why, oh why, did he have to make her heart pound like a steel drums on a cruise ship? Okay. Never heard that analogy before. This was not for her. There was a reason hadn't taken credit for any of this. He didn't want her to get the wrong idea. He was merely helping out a local business owner, not making some kind of dramatic, romantic gesture, so the swooning had to stop. She should be ashamed of the fact that her knees were wobbling like chocolate pudding. If Julian wanted her as more than a one-time accidental hookup, he would have said so by now. Are we also counting that as a hookup? God knew he was blunter than a baseball bat about everything else, and he'd written back to Secret Admirer. Hello! Those were not the actions of an interested man. Those were the actions of a man who perused the grocery aisle and said, I think I'll take this reliable cauliflower instead of the mixed bag of root vegetables I can't name. She needed to get his lack of interest through her thick skull, collect his letter, and read it out of pure curiosity, then be done with this whole confusing mess with the professor. With a final yearning looking up the awning, Hallie jogged down Grapevine Way towards Fudge Judy. She peeked in through the window, making sure her friends were nowhere in sight, before she slipped in through the front door and went into the kitchen. Lavinia appeared from behind the stainless steel workstation and threw up her hands at Hallie's entrance, then slumped forward onto the waist-high table, clutching at her chest through a pink apron. Fucking hell, I thought we were being robbed! What the bloody hell are you at? Trapped, cursing herself for not taking the long way, Hallie shifted onto the balls of her feet. I just thought I would go for a little midnight stroll. What? Where? Why did her ideas always sound worse when they were spoken out loud, like every single one? Down Julian's jogging path, she mumbled. Down Julian's jogging path. After a moment, Lavinia banged a fist down on the table. He's written you, hasn't he? Everything all right in here? Jerome called through the door of the storage closet. Hallie pressed a finger to her lips. All's well, love. Just bumped my elbow. Lavinia reached back to untie her apron, a somewhat maniacal look in her eyes. I'm coming with you. There would be no stopping her. Apron removal meant business. I'm not reading you the letter. It's private. Lavinia rocked back on her heels, considering those parameters. You don't have to read it to me word for word, but I want the general temperature. Fine. Also, we all know real friends, they're reading it to each other. They're acting now. They're passing it back and forth. They're analyzing it together. Be so for real. Going out for a smoke, love, Lavinia shouted, the door banging behind the 2 women on their way out in the alley. How do you know he's written back? He told me. He told you? Lavinia drew out. Yes. She hugged her elbows tight, then realized she looked defensive, so she let them drop. And yes, I realize that means that he isn't interested in real-life Hallie, only the Hallie from the letter. I'm just going to read his answer to satisfy my curiosity. That's all. I might trust you on that. Lavinia jogged up to keep up. If you hadn't sworn to me, you wouldn't write these letters in the first place. Did you see the new awning uncorked? Your ability to distract us from an actual problem is unparalleled, but I'll bite. Lavinia tilted her head. A new awning? What happened to the red one covered in pigeon shite? It's gone, and I think it was Julian who arranged it. Hallie snagged Lavinia's wrist and guided her down the private path leading to Voss Vineyard. I traced those promo business cards for Court to their table at Winedown. That was him all over it. Too, right? That has him written all over it too, right? I realize this is all beginning to sound very Scooby-Doo. Oh, I'm Daphne. She gets to shag Fred. You can have him. I have a healthy distrust of blonde men. I don't want to trust him. I want to bang him. Where am I losing you? Hallie covered her mouth to muffle a laugh. You aren't. The fact that we're sneaking around in the dark discussing sexual relations with a cartoon character, one who wears a sailor suit no less, is exactly why we're friends. They traded a wary smile in the moonlight. Back to the case of the mystery awning, then. We think Julian is responsible. Yes, Hallie sighed, despairing over the zero-gravity sensation in her breast. I could have walked away almost unscathed if he wasn't prank call champion of the universe. If he didn't keep making these gestures that remind me why I was infatuated with him in the first place. Why I spent so long hung up on him. Oh, I forgot that she liked him from a while back. I forgot that this was the whole thing. Lavinia made a sound of understanding. He's got you dangling from a fishhook, all gape-mouthed and wiggly. Thank you for that flattering comparison. Hallie laughed, stopping in front of this tree stump, frowning. This is where the letter should be, wedged in between the crack. What a coincidence. That's where you'd like Julian to be. Hallie overcame her blush. You're not totally wrong. They each took out their phones and turned on the flashlights, searching the ground around the stump. Could he have taken it back? Why was she dizzy with the hope over that possibility? No, why would he do that? Maybe he realized you're his dream girl. Lavinia's beam of light landed on something white behind a brambleberry bush. No, sorry, found it. Must have blown over. Oh, Hallie said too brightly. Okay. She approached the envelope the way one might approach a lit puddle of kerosene, and picked it up, commanding her stomach to stop pitching. All right, so I'll just bring this home and read it. Several seconds ticked by in the foggy stillness. Hallie tore open the envelope. Exactly, Lavinia said, sitting down the tree stump. I'll be right here, awaiting any breadcrumbs you choose to throw me. She barely heard her friend's quip over the pounding in her ears. Pacing a few steps away, she shined her flashlight down at the letter and read. This is the letter. Hello. I don't know where to begin. Obviously, this is all quite unusual. After all, we are communicating as two people who know each other, but we have never met. It feels like we have, doesn't it? I apologize for talking in circles. It's not easy to expose oneself on paper and leave it out in a field where it could fall into the wrong hands. You were brave to go first. In your letter, you mentioned having too much space to think. I always thought I wanted that. Lots of space, silence, but lately it has become more of a force field to keep you people out. I've had it activated so long that anyone brave enough to come inside feels like an intruder rather than what they really are. An anomaly, a fork in the road of time, the thing that pulls me from a distraction and forces me to become the next version of myself. And isn't it ironic that I teach the meaning of time for a living and yet I'm staunchly fighting the passage of it? Time has changed, but letting it move you forward is hard. What is he, a fucking poet? This is how he thinks? This is how he processes things in his brain works. Like, mine would be like jumble. Like, bing, 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 bing. Like, it wouldn't make any sense. Enough about me. I'm nowhere near as interesting as you are. I'll say this. I believe that if you were brave enough to write a secret admirer letter to someone, you're brave enough to evolve, if that's what you want. Maybe writing back will inspire me to do the same. Sincerely, Julian. Well, Lavinia called from her stump, what is the temperature? Hallie had no earthly clue. He'd gone way more in depth than she was expecting. It reminded her of the conversation they had in the kitchen. Emotional, honest, only this time he'd had it with someone else. On one hand, his words had spread a bomb over a wound inside of her. You're brave enough to evolve. On the other, it felt worse than if he'd asked to meet the mystery person, or express serious romantic interest. Tears prickled against the back of her eyelids. She quickly folded the letter up and stowed it in her pocket of her hoodie. I would say he's cautiously interested, complimentary but not flirtatious. He leaves it open-ended for more correspondence. When Lavinia didn't respond right away, Hallie knew her friend had picked up on the hurt in her tone. Are you going to write him again? Lavinia finally asked quietly. I don't know. Hallie tried to laugh, but it sounded forced. None of my impulsive decisions have resulted in actual pain before. Maybe that's a good sign to stop. I have a lighter in my pocket. Shall we go burn him at the stake? Nah. Hallie turned, giving her friend a grateful look. I hear they don't even have a shrimp and garlic linguine in prison. I guess we'll let the lucky prick live, Lavinia muttered, pushing to her feet. Coming to stand behind Hallie, she put an arm around her shoulder, and they both stared out over the top of the vines. You did something sort of brash, babe. But I have to tell you, I fucking admire you for taking a shot and doing something a little wild. Once in a while, a good thing comes out from a shot of sudden bravery. Just not this time. Lavinia didn't answer, just squeezed Hallie's shoulder. This is a good thing, Hallie said slowly, watching her breath turn into fog. I need a wake-up call. Since Rebecca left us, I've fallen into this pattern of disorganized commotion. I don't want to acknowledge how bad it hurts to be alone now, and I don't know what happens next in my life. So I just kept finding ways to avoid making decisions, to avoid being the Hallie I was when she was around, because it's too hard to do it alone. She closed her eyes and squared her shoulders. But I can. I'm ready. I need to grow up now and stop making these She gestures to the stump. Ridiculous choices. Starting tomorrow, I'm turning over a new leaf. Why not start tonight? I need closure. Again. Again, her gaze rested on the stump. I need to tell him goodbye first. The letter was already gone. There's like a little skip. A little flower. Break. Break. And break. The letter was already gone. Julian stared down at the stump with a pit in his stomach. It was nearing 1 o'clock in the morning. They'd been home for an hour, but he'd spent it convincing Natalie to go to bed instead of cracking open a bottle of champagne and playing an old version of Yahtzee she'd found in the hallway closet. As soon as he heard his sister sawing logs through her bedroom door... Just say snoring. As soon as he heard his sister sawing logs through her bedroom door, he'd booked it up the path to take back the piece of communication, but obviously he'd been too late. His secret admirer had retrieved the envelope while he was at the party, and he supposed that eliminated everyone who was there tonight. Why did that surprise him? Had he been holding out a small amount of dumb hope that his admirer was Hallie? How does that add up? Like, how did you come to that conclusion that nobody at the party could have done it? Idiot. Why would she admire someone who was a rainstorm compared to her sunshine? She was the one to point out they were too different and she'd only been friends. He agreed, of course. Of course. He did. Still, God, why did he feel so slimy? Despite the dropping temperature, the back of his neck was covered in sweat. He had no choice but to return home, carrying mounting senses of dread and shame behind him like chains, knowing he'd written back to a stranger while he was, let's face it, infatuated with someone else. What the hell was he gonna do now? Okay. I think I got one more in me. You guys got time? You guys up for it? Let me hold on. I read those fast. And welcome. And look, we still have so much to go. How long is it gonna take though? Julian jogged down Grapevine Way that afternoon, his pace slowing when he spied a lazy Sunday line of people on the sidewalk. But this time they weren't waiting outside uncorked. They were patiently waiting their turn to get inside corked. What a happy surprise. Others were emerging with bottles of his family's wine in their hands, tied up in ribbons. He made a sound in his throat, nodded once, and moved at a faster clip to make up for lost time. After running more than a block, he finally allowed himself to smile, finally acknowledged the somewhat unsettling flip in the dead center of his chest. Now that Lauren's shop was on an upswing, Hallie wouldn't worry anymore, right? She'd be happy? Perhaps it wouldn't hurt to update some of Lorna's indoor displays, have the floor buffed. The line of people might be there because of the deal on the business cards he handed out, but what about a long-term plan? For Corked and Voss Vineyard. Instead of working on Wexler's book this morning, he had a meeting with the bookkeeper and, with Corinne's approval, had shifted some of their financial priorities. This year would be less about producing stock and more about selling what was already on shelves. Once they had the revenue in place, they could make the necessary improvements to come back later and better than ever. Julian was busy making calculations in his head when he ran past the stump. He stopped so quickly, dirt kicked up in the air. A new letter? His immediate instinct was to keep jogging. Don't pick it up. Don't open it. Hallie was not on the other end of these notes. After last night, they seemed to be at even more distinct odds than before. Just two people who traded heavy personal secrets in a vineyard. Two people who completely lost their minds one night and pleasured themselves together in his kitchen, who couldn't seem to stop colliding. He could almost certainly return to Stanford with the sense that he'd left behind unfinished business, but that couldn't be helped, could it? He'd have to simply live with it. How? They would never again have a conversation like the one they'd had the night of the storm, or while picking grapes on his family's land. Exchanges he continued to replay over and over in his head, trying to make sense out of them being so different, while finding it so easy to understand each other. So much so that when he written this letter back to the secret admirer, his words were almost a period on the end of his conversations with Hallie. It was hard not to crave a response to that, even if it wasn't coming from her. The letter was in his hands before he realized he'd picked it up. Fuck! Also, I'm sorry, has he never heard of opposites attract? Also, why would you want somebody exactly the same as you? This great man is supposed to be smart, a professor, not, logical, but, the reasonings for him to not be with her and, why they wouldn't work is just asinine. They don't even make any sense. In the real world, they don't really make any sense. He thinks she's hot, he likes her, she makes him smile, they get along, they have a good time, they have good conversation, he could talk to her. Not because she's fun and not organized. He's like, they could never work. We'd never be happy. Because this is so much better. This is a better idea. This is... Okay. Anyways, he picks up the letter. Fuck. Julian started running again, through the cool, twisting haze escaping down off the mountain. The sun broke through the mist in fragments and cracks, a rolling spotlight over different sections of the vines. Beneath his feet, the earth was solid, and Julian was grateful for that, because holding the letter caused anticipation and dread to war in his middle all the way back to the house. On the off chance Natalie was awake before 2 p.m. on a weekend, he tucked the envelope into his pocket on the way to his bedroom, making it there without incident. After closing the door behind him, he stripped off his sweaty shirt and placed it in the hamper, toed off his running shoes, and paced the floor beside the king-size bed. Finally, he couldn't stand the unknown anymore. He took the letter out of his pocket and broke the seal. Now the letter. It has girly handwriting. Or girly font. Dear Julian. It's kind of annoying font to read. It's like script, but not. There was one part of your response that stuck out to me. That there are events or people in our lives that force us to become the next version of ourselves. Are we all constantly fighting that change to something new and unfamiliar? Is that why no matter what we do in our personal or professional lives, somehow it's never done with full confidence? There's always the fear of being wrong. Or maybe we're afraid to be right and make progress because that means change. And moving forward is hard, like you said. Scary. Lately, I think moving forward as an adult means accepting that bad things happen and there's not always something you can do to avoid or fix it. Is having that knowledge the final change? If so, what is beyond that bitter pill? No wonder we're digging in our heels. As I'm writing this, I'm starting to wonder if the longer we fight change in ourselves, the less time we have to live as better people, or at least more self-aware people. I propose that we both do something that scares us this week. Secretly yours. Fuck, Julian said again, finding himself on the edge of the bed, without remembering exactly when he'd sat down. Once again, he was completely and utterly intrigued by this person's letter, and yet he wanted to tear it up and burn it in the fireplace. Not only because he alternated between hearing the words in Hallie's voice and feeling immense guilt for reading in the first place, but more so because the letter challenged him. He hadn't accepted or denied the challenge yet. Still, his veins felt like they'd been pumped full of static. Something that scares us. Julian left the letter on his bed, but mentally carried it into the shower, then into his office, where he once again sat in front of the blinking cursor for hours. At some point he heard Natalie stumble out of her room for sustenance before going straight back in. Finally he gave up attempting to concentrate on anything else and returned to his bedroom, picking up the letter and trying to find some sort of clue in the handwriting. Something about the basic stationery and ink color that might identify the author. Maybe if he could just meet this person face to face, he can confirm whether or not that attraction went both ways. For some reason he hoped it wouldn't, but nonetheless they could be friends, right? Even though they had only exchanged letters, he couldn't help feel sort of kinship with this person who was capable of identifying the words he'd never been able to speak aloud, except with Hallie. Maybe rather than writing back, he should go talk to her instead. Anticipation swelled so rapidly at the thought of seeing her, hearing her voice, that he dropped the letter. From a person he now willingly corresponded with. A person who was not Hallie. What the hell had he gotten himself into? And break. I'm sorry to drag you away from your fan club, Hallie teased Lorna, smiling at her grandmother's best friend across the console of her truck. They drove through town Sunday afternoon, yielding for buzzed pedestrians every 15 yards or so. Phoebe Bridgers playing gently on the radio. Are you sure about taking a lunch break? Of course I am, dear. These old feet need a rest. Lorna smoothed the silk-patterned scarf around her neck. Besides, Nina has it under control. Before she even finished her sentence, she started laughing. Can you believe I have an employee now? A couple weeks ago I barely had customers. Now I've hired part-time help just to keep up with them all. Hallie's chest expanded with relief, with gratitude. When she pulled up outside of Cork, patrons were gathered around her grandmother's white wrought iron table, with glasses of wine in hand, bringing it to life, giving it purpose again, keeping Rebecca's memory alive, at least for Hallie, and she owed most of this to Julian. His name in her head was a simultaneous shot of adrenaline and a punch to the gut. Was he running back to his admirer again at that very moment? I propose that we both do something that scares us this week. Was he in the process of figuring out what scared him? At the very least, Hallie was in the process of checking that box today, doing something uncomfortable, fulfilling the challenge she'd laid down for herself and Julian by moving forward. She called Lorna about her trip to the library this morning, and the wine shop owner had insisted upon coming along for moral support, despite the crowds that were now descending on Corch with Voss Vineyard discount cards and unquenchable thirst. Lorna, I couldn't be happier for you. One of Hallie's hands left the wheel to rub at the euphoric pressure in her chest. I could just burst. I didn't see it coming, breathed the older woman, staring unseeing out the windshield of the truck. Then again, some of the best things in life happen when you least expect them. Sort of like Julian suddenly showing back up in St. Helena to write a book, or the professor somehow being the chivalrous hero that lived rent-free in her memory, while also being completely different than she imagined. So, how'd y'all move? Sneaky. Fall in love again and again. Fall in love again and again. Okay. Where was I? Or the professor somehow being the chivalrous hero that lives rent-free in her memory while also being completely different than she imagined for the last 15 years? Yes, he might be the quietly studious man of her imagination, but he was also intense. A keeper of painful secrets. Funny and quick to find solutions. Protective. A million times more engrossing than the person she'd crafted in her mind. And she had no choice but to leave him with some final food for thought and move on. Which is what she should have done in the beginning, before getting in too deep. What if you spend your whole life expecting one thing and get another entirely? I'd say the one thing you can expect in life are thwarted plans, said Lorna. Preach that, sister. Fate keeps its own schedule, but sometimes fate drops a present in our lap, and we realize that if everything we'd arranged ourselves had gone according to plan, the gift from fate never would have arrived. Like you coming to live with Rebecca and St. Helena. All those attempts to get your mother on the right path didn't work out, but in the end, those struggles are what brought you here. Rebecca was always saying that. Lorna, what's meant to be will always find a way. She loved a good saying. That she did. Hallie shifted in the driver's seat but couldn't get comfortable. What if I only belonged here in St. Helena while Rebecca was alive? That's how it feels. Like I don't know how to be in this place anymore. It's just myself. Lorna was quiet for a minute. Hallie could feel the shop owner gathering herself before she eventually reached out and laid a hand on Hallie's shoulder. When you came here, this place changed, along with Rebecca. It rearranged itself to fit you, and now, Hallie, you are a part of the landscape, a beautiful part of it. St. Helena will always be better for having you here. When Hallie shook her head, a tear came loose, and she wiped it away. I'm a disaster. I'm flighty and disorganized, and I don't know how to control my impulses. She was always around to help me do that, to know who I am. I was Rebecca's granddaughter. You still are. Always will be. But you're also Hallie, and Hallie is beautiful for all her flaws, because the good things about you far outweigh the bad. Until Lorna said those words to Hallie, she didn't know how badly she needed to hear them. Some of the density in her chest lessened, her grip loosening on the steering wheel. Thank you, Lorna. I'm happy to tell you the truth anytime you want to hear it. Lorna patted her shoulder one more time before taking her hand back. What made you decide to approach the library today about the landscaping job? Hallie hummed, took a breath. I want to do something she would be proud of, but I think more importantly, I have to do something I'm proud of. I have to start taking pride, period. In myself, in my work. It has to be for me now. Hallie pulled her truck up against the curb across the street from the white U-shaped building, also known as the St. Helena Library. It stood by itself at the end of the cul-de-sac, sun-soaked vineyard vines spreading up behind the structure in endless rows. This morning, while pondering the trip, she'd bitten her nails down to the quick. It had been a long time coming. Some part of her never really expected to get there. The courtyard of the library definitely needed greenery and color and warmth. As of now, it had none of those things, just overgrown indigenous plants that would have been beautiful with a little maintaining and the addition of some perennials. It did have a big lawn in front, shaded by an oak tree. 2 children sat on that lawn now, blowing bubbles with very little success. Suds dripping off their wrists onto the grass. A smaller toddler nodded off in her mother's lap, their library books spread out around them. Hallie couldn't help but think the library could be thriving, with a little care. If people drove past, the flowers would call to them like an invitation. Marigolds and sunflowers and water fixtures. But in order to do this particular job, she would have to come with an exact blueprint, have it approved by library manager Miss Hum, and stick to it. With Rebecca there to guide her, Hallie would have had no problem with the plan. But she was a dress pinned to a laundry line in a windstorm these days, waving in every direction. Had the year she spent under her grandmother's wing been a waste, though? No. As soon as Rebecca left, Hallie had gone back to being indecisive and jumbled. But it didn't have to continue that way. She could do something spectacular all by herself. She could be proud of herself, discombobulated chaos and all. She was the granddaughter of a community staple, a gloriously kind woman who loved routine and simple pleasures, like wind chimes on the back porch and teach-yourself calligraphy kits. Hallie had settled down as much as she was capable, because it was important to her grandmother. She appreciated when Hallie tried, when she reined in her scattered focus and applied it to schoolwork or carried out a specific landscaping strategy. There was no one around now to appreciate those efforts. No one but herself. That would have to be enough. Hey guys. Sorry for the little scare. Don't know why that happened. Oh my god, what is with this? It's because this stupid wire. She's having a crisis, I'm having a crisis, she's having a crisis of self, I'm having a crisis of technology. We all go through things. She's not special. Okay. That's as good as it's gonna get. Just, you don't listen to my words. Don't look at me. Don't look at me. Don't perceive me. Okay. Where was I? Just gotta take pride in her own work. Gotta take pride in herself. Yeah. Okay. Taking on a huge project like this definitely qualified as scary. It was a job that would require structure, diligence, and a very particular librarian looking over her shoulder the entire time. Was she up for it? Yes. Something had to give. Putting her anxieties on paper, writing letters to Julian, had been therapeutic. She could be totally honest about her fears and feelings. That honesty felt good, authentic. But now she needed to be truthful with herself. To admit she'd been avoiding the library job because she didn't believe herself capable of the focus it would take to complete a task so large. Rebecca believed in her, though. So did Lorna. It was time to take that faith and turn it inward. Lorna nudged her in the ribs from the passenger seat. Go ahead, dear. You can do it. I'll be waiting right here. She turned to her. Are you sure you don't want bottomless champagne brunch instead? Maybe next week, Lorna laughed, shooing her into opening the driver's side door. For now, I want to watch my best friend's wild child granddaughter learn a lesson. That she doesn't have to change to suit anyone, unless that anyone is herself. They held hands for a moment, then Hallie blew out a slow breath, climbed out of the truck, and crossed the street. The cool brass doorknob slid against her palm, and she opened the heavy library door. Just as she remembered, the place was bright and inviting on the inside. Stained glass windows lit the stacks in reds and blues. Hushed conversation took place over the computers at the tables, and a distinctive scent of old leather and floor polish drifted out to greet her. Miss Hum's head popped out from behind the reception desk, her slender, deep brown fingers pausing on the keys. She removed her glasses, letting them drop to where they were caught by a long beaded necklace, and stood. Hallie Welch. Rebecca told me you would show up sooner or later, she said, a smile tugging at her lips. Are you here to apply for a library card, or finally fix our garden? Hallie took a moment to reconnect with her grandmother, like a whispered hello from somewhere beyond. Then she centered herself and approached the desk. Maybe both. You wouldn't happen to have any self-help books on staying organized, would you? I'm sure I can pull a few. They're for a friend, obviously, Hallie joked, matching the librarian's knowing smile. As for the garden, yes, I'm ready. I thought we could discuss layout today and I could get started soon. Miss Hum arched an eyebrow. When exactly? Soon, Hallie said firmly in that moment, accepting that there were some things about her she could never change, and that, maybe, she didn't need to. Why did that seem so, like, I'm so wise now? Not the self-actualization. We still have a good chunk to go, because keep in mind, he still doesn't know about the letters, and they still have to fuck at some point, because it's still a romance book. By this author, they usually fuck by now, so this is a slow burn for her. And I don't remember, but I feel like we still have to find out things about their past, right? Probably. Stay tuned. Oh, how many chapters? So you know how many are left. Let's see. So we just ended chapter 15. Is there a table of contents? That'd be helpful. No table of contents. Okay, we gotta count this hoe. Or I could just go to the end. Let's see. I'm just bad at math. This is okay. 24. Wait. 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. Okay, there's 9 chapters left. So stay tuned. Maybe I'll do another one later this week if y'all are interested. But I hope you enjoyed these 3 chapters. She's on top of it. She's feeling good. She's back in the swing of things. Yeah. A little visit from El Jefe. Alright. You're welcome. Peace out, Girl Scouts. Bye, my lovelies.